Alright. Guess it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. It's May 21st, 11:30. This is B flat. Just wanted to do a better demonstration than what I've tried to communicate with multiple people over multiple chats about a concept regarding Mirage, which will additionally contribute to visual blockage right across the board, depending on the type of Mirage it is. I do not like the vocabulary used to describe the Mirages. I think a lot can be done to fix this problem. The first thing we have to do is understand the relationship between and let me back up for a second. This is dealing specifically with the path of light that interacts with the surface of the water. Okay, anything that does not interact with the surface of the water that creates stretching, compression, or superior mirage is not being applied here. We are only dealing with the interaction of light that interacts with the water surface. So now we'll start. The basics behind this is that we will have objects like a house that will cast a ray of incidence onto the surface of the water and reflect at an angle of reflection. This is the point of reflection. Reflection does not magically happen in the middle of the air. Reflection by law needs a surface to reflect off of. That surface will have a normal, an incident ray, and a ray of reflection. Now once that ray starts entering the air above the surface or going through the change between the surface and a certain height, it can hit a point where it refracts. Now, I haven't drawn out the exact angles or dimensions, but the end result would be that there would be an angle of incidence into a point of refraction and an angle of refraction that will result in a ray that heads towards the observer on his line of sight. So again, we have a point of refraction, we have a point of reflection, we have a path of a ray, so we have both reflection and refraction happening for this demonstration. If we have a smooth surface of water, the blue would represent the water line. We have a specular reflection from the house. This would be that every ray continues to progress along the path. All of the incident rays are nearly the same. The angles of reflection are nearly the same. Afterwards, they would experience the refraction, which will then line all of these rays at very low angle near the surface of the water back down towards the observer who is at great distance. We can have great distance between the house where this reflection occurs, where the refraction takes place, and eventually where it gets to the observer, because these are all low angles and great distances in between. Most of these reflections that contribute to the inferior mirage, two models that I'm going to call one specular and one diffuse, happen at great distances. So if we move to the diffuse portion, and you can look this up, everybody can kind of Google the concept. I've tried to recreate it as best I can. You will have rays of light coming from the house that will intersect a turbulent or undulating body of water, and we will have certain incident rays that hit the top of the wave and all reflect uniformly, and we will have a bunch of incident rays that will connect with the surface of the water and reflect in a different direction. This would all be contingent on the height of the wave and the frequency of the wave. Okay, in relation to distance and angles between overall incidence and angle to the observer after or previous or preceding refraction. The previous slides were dealing with the light coming from the house structure. Now, what about the light coming from the sky? The light coming from the sky is coming from all different directions, and it represents the majority of what will reflect off of the surface of the water and eventually refract off that surface of the water. Reflect off the surface of the water and eventually refract towards the observer. Now, this is a very complicated drawing to convey all of this. So you just have to realize that each one of these incident rays to a turbulent surface will end up on a path that might head towards the observer and refract back down towards the observer from the distance. This is all happening across the body of the water, somewhere between the house and the observer. This is happening, and something like this will be created. One other thing, this light ray that reflects will also have to clear the height of the wave that's proximal or closer to the observer. So there's a point where some of this light rays are going to get blocked, and therefore some of the low angle light rays are going to get through. It's all going to be about these low angle calculations, which I can understand it. I don't know if I can communicate any better to anyone who's paying attention to this. So now we get to the meat and bones, meat and bones, I guess, of the whole point here. We have a mirage, and this is where I claim a mirage has different heights. Okay, this dotted line is the plane of the mirage. We can have a very weak refraction event that creates this very short and close to the shore plane of mirage. It's actually the plane of refraction that creates the mirage. Number 2 can be much higher. Okay, it comes down right to the edge of the land. The shore would be obscured. This one would see some of the bank next to the body of water. We can proceed up to where the mirage obscures everything from the window on the door down and up to the roof line. Okay, so we do have from this drawing the plane of mirage. That's the dotted line I have just pointed out at the different heights. We have the basics that I communicated as far as the path of light. On each of these, the bottom line would be the sea level. That is the water level. Sea level. On a flat plane, that is the sea level. And obviously, what I'm describing here is a description from the standpoint that we are on a flat plane, and water is conforming to that surface. Again, we have the reflected ray. I didn't put in the incident ray. I don't want this to be more confusing. And we have the resulting refractive ray. I've also extended the line back to the left because the observer's line of sight comes into play here. So if we get down to a height of, let's say, number 3, if there was a sailboat proximal or closer to the observer than where the mirage starts, we will observe the full sailboat. If the sailboat were to sail into the plane of mirage, the plane of refraction, we would see the sailboat, start to become obscured. Bottom up. Bottom up. Need to understand that. Now, Travis has put forth observations of birds that are flying and disappear into the mirage. Again, these birds, based on this observer's line of sight, are above the incident where whatever is being created and broadcast in front, closer from the waterline, closer to the observer, will produce visual information, refracted visual information, that will overwrite any of the frequencies of the visual information from the birds that have descended below that line. That light will not make it to the observer. This light will. This full sailboat will make it to the observer. Anything below the plane of refraction will not. That's why we see bottom up. That's why we see everything obscured to a window height, to a roof height, to a particular spot on the shoreline. Okay, all of this is in exact accordance with the laws that define the path of light. We have the mechanism for reflection. That is the surface of the water. If you don't have a mechanism for reflection that you have in your theory that things magically happen in the middle of the air, please show me how that is backed up by the laws that define how light travels. I know everybody has observations. I know everybody has come up with a theory. But your theories have to abide by the laws. I have a law of linear propagation of light, rectilinear propagation. Light travels in straight lines. I have a reflection. Light travels in a straight line and reflects off a surface. I have refraction. Light enters a boundary where it does not invert, it just changes direction. And all of these directions end up being observed at great distance. Everything comes together. Okay? And again, I am not talking about what stretches above this area. I'm not really going to address the compression or the looming. You could probably apply everything that I've said here to a superior mirage. You just have to realize that there is a surface above us that may have the right moisture content or dynamics of the atmosphere in order to reflect at low angle. Anytime we see a superior mirage, it's miles away from us. Refraction mirages, the inferior, and again superior or diffuse, we can observe much closer. So this is the mechanics of what I would describe as how mirage actually occurs. Now, a lot of things here are my terminology, which could be blended with other people's terminology, but you have to consider that what I'm presenting here is the mechanics of a mirage. And everybody can use this information and hopefully work towards establishing an understanding and a vocabulary that can communicate this a lot better than the astronomers who have been tasked with trying to describe this. An astronomer really doesn't care about what's happening near the ground. They're looking into the sky. You know, the books that you read about the behavior of air tend to focus on what they're looking at in the sky. And they will take a couple of paragraphs, maybe a couple of pages, and try to tie some of this in, just whimsically saying, well, it behaves like that up there, so it behaves like this down here. That is incorrect. You know, I reject that. You know, when Travis mentioned about Andrew Thomas Young and mentioning in his responses, don't take him too seriously for what he's written. That's because none of them are very serious about these low angle observations. So maybe we should get our information from those who are serious about it. This is where I'm at. So I thank everybody for their time. Trying to communicate without visuals is very difficult. I've done better in open conversations with individuals who have taken the time to engage with me in a video conference talking through these points. When individuals refuse that invitation and you have to try to communicate through comments in the text, you have nothing to go by. And it's a very aggravating way of communicating. I am doing my part to create the visuals that have driven everything I've been trying to communicate. So let's move forward from there. Thank you very much. Have a great day.